It started as a romantic adventure, a honeymoon in Brazil, tropical forests, scenic trails, breathtaking sunsets, but Hiroshi and Yuki Tanaka never came back. For 7 years, their families searched. The Japanese consulate Interpol and the Brazilian federal police followed every lead. Nothing. Until one morning, a forest ranger found something inside a centuries-old tree that would horrify investigators and finally explain what happened on that trail in Rio de Janeiro. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us until the end, because this is the kind of story you won't believe actually happened. The discovery, September 1997, Urca Hill, Rio de Janeiro. Veteran forest ranger Roberto Silva, 38, was on his routine patrol. For over 15 years, he had walked the same paths through the forest's lush slopes, monitoring erosion, logging trail conditions, and keeping an eye out for careless tourists. That morning, something stopped him in his tracks. A Jequitiba tree, a towering giant with a 3-meter-wide trunk, had a fresh vertical crack that hadn't been there before. It was deep, unnatural. Roberto shined his flashlight into the crack. At first, he thought it was fabric, maybe trash left by hikers. Then he saw bone, and then he saw a second shape, wrapped around the first. His breath caught in his throat. "Meu Deus," he whispered. "There's something inside the tree." He called it in immediately. "Central, this is Silva. I found human remains inside a tree. I repeat, human remains." Within 90 minutes, multiple vehicles climbed the trail. Police, forensics, a representative from the Japanese consulate. Inside the tree, they found 2 human skeletons, wrapped in decomposing clothing, still embracing, still wearing what looked like honeymoon hiking gear. And next to them, 2 Japanese passports. One read, Hiroshi Tanaka. The disappearance. 7 years earlier, on March 17, 1990, Hiroshi Tanaka, 28, and his wife Yuki, 26, had checked out of their hotel in Copacabana for a simple day hike up Urca Hill. It was part of their honeymoon. They'd flown from Osaka to Rio just 2 days after their wedding. It was their dream trip. They had carefully planned it for months, on a modest budget, packed with maps, books, and handwritten lists. They were last seen at 2:30 p.m. that day, buying water and granola bars from a vendor near the trail. They never returned. That evening, the hotel reported them missing. Within hours, police launched a search. The Japanese consulate was alerted. Within 2 days, the families in Japan were notified and flew to Rio. The case quickly escalated into an international incident, the search. The operation was massive. Dozens of officers, rescue teams, volunteers, helicopters, and tracking dogs were deployed. Every part of the trail was combed. Divers searched nearby ponds. Climbers checked steep, inaccessible cliffs. Nothing. The couple's belongings, passports, wallets, even their camera, were still locked in the hotel safe. They had planned to return for dinner, but they vanished without a trace. Japanese media descended on Brazil. NHK, Japan's national broadcaster, ran nightly updates. The case drew headlines in Tokyo and Sao Paulo. For weeks, the families posted flyers, offered rewards, held press conferences, and then nothing. The case went cold. The tree back to 1997. After Silva's discovery, a forensic team worked carefully to open the Jequitiba tree without damaging the remains. Inside, they found 2 skeletons, a Nikon film camera, a leather wallet with Japanese currency, a small shoulder bag containing a feminine hygiene kit, a folded tourist map and snack wrappers, 2 plastic-wrapped Japanese passports, and most haunting of all, the couple's arms were still locked around one another. Dr. Marcos Figueiredo, one of Brazil's top forensic pathologists, examined the remains. There were no signs of trauma, fractures, or restraint. His conclusions stunned the room. They entered the tree while still alive, and they likely died there, together. But why? And how? The mystery. The Jequitiba tree was large, but climbing inside wasn't easy. Investigators theorized the couple took shelter during a sudden tropical storm. Evidence showed that on March 17, 1990, Rio had experienced violent afternoon thunderstorms, but sheltering inside a tree, that made no sense. Until the next discovery. Inside the hollow, behind the couple, forensic officers found collapsed soil, a mixture of rocks, roots, and mud that had fallen from above. It had blocked the only exit. They hadn't just entered the tree, they'd been trapped inside it. Inside the hollow. Forensic officers worked through the night. Floodlights were rigged around the Jequitiba tree as a team of specialists in environmental archaeology carefully widened the split in the trunk. It wasn't just about removing remains. It was about understanding the story of what had happened inside, and the more they uncovered, the more disturbing that story became. The inner chamber of the tree measured about 2.1 meters tall, 1.3 meters wide, hollowed by centuries of rot, termites, and fungus. The bark had sealed over old decay, forming what the locals called a tree cave, but that cave had become a crypt. Inside, Hiroshi and Yuki Tanaka's skeletons were positioned in a seated embrace facing one another. Their arms were still loosely entwined, their backs pressed against the rough interior walls. The remains of Yuki's nylon backpack were beside her, with several items remarkably preserved, despite the tropical humidity. Among the items, 2 water bottles, one cracked, both empty, a small black and red Nikon FM2 camera, a cloth pouch with a pen, mirror, and a map, 3 snack wrappers, a thin flyer from a local tourism office, 2 neatly folded ponchos, a single, half-burned tea light candle, and something else, a handwritten message, faded, curled, almost torn through the center. The final words. The message, written in a mixture of Japanese and broken English, was scrawled on the back of a tourist flyer advertising trails in Urca Hill. Forensic linguists and translators worked for days to reconstruct its contents. Here's what they found. March 17th, rain, heavy, we ran, shelter from lightning, found hollow in tree, safe, we wait storm. Then a change in tone. March 18th, something collapse, entry blocked, no air move, dark always, screamed, no one here. March 19th, no water, use bottle, Hiroshi calm, I scared. But he smile, he sing, it help. March 20th, write for family. If you find, tell them we stayed brave. March 21st, tried claw earth, too thick, no way, still together, still praying. And the last line, written shakily, perhaps by Hiroshi or Yuki, it was unclear, read, we are not afraid now, only quiet. It was signed simply, H and Y, the camera. Perhaps the most haunting artifact retrieved was the Nikon FM2 camera. Old, water-damaged, but inside, miraculously, was a full roll of 35mm film. Police sent it to Sao Paulo for professional development. Labs handled it in climate-controlled conditions to preserve every frame. What developed stunned the investigators. The first half of the roll was predictable. Selfies on the Copacabana boardwalk, a lunch by the beach, the trailhead with a thumbs-up pose. Then, the first images from within the cave, a flashlight illuminating damp bark. Yuki's legs, seated on the hollow floor. Hiroshi's silhouette, blurred in motion. A single photo of their hands clasped together. And then, one photo that none of the investigators could shake. Yuki's face, lit by candlelight, looking directly into the camera. Eyes glassy, lips parted in fear. Some believed it was a farewell. Others said she was trying to leave a trace, to speak one last time. The final frame was black, no light, just shadow and silence. A timeline of terror. Using forensic analysis, medical experts reconstructed the likely sequence of their final days. On March 17th, the couple entered the tree during a sudden tropical storm, likely seeking brief shelter. A mudslide or shift in the root system closed off the only opening. With no tools, they couldn't dig their way out. The opening was at shoulder height, but packed tight with dense soil and vines. Their flashlight batteries died after 72 hours. Water ran out by day 4. The temperature inside the tree remained stable, but oxygen levels would have dropped slowly. Experts believe they survived at least 6 to 7 days, and throughout it all, they stayed together, arms wrapped, heads close, the reaction. The global reaction was swift and heartbreaking. Japanese media reported the details in somber tones. NHK aired a full special titled The Tree That Kept Them, featuring Hiroshi and Yuki's parents, who had waited 7 years for answers. Brazilian papers questioned how such a massive search had missed the tree in 1990. Locals said the tree was avoided, believed to be cursed or sacred. Some said their grandparents never went near it. One ranger admitted he once found footprints there, but thought they were from a boar, but no one had thought to look inside. Stillness. The most chilling detail, the tree, massive, ancient, unmovable, stood only 300 meters from the main trail. Not far, not deep, close enough for hikers to pass every day. close enough to hear a scream if one had reached the air. But the tree muffled everything. Their voices never escaped. Their final days, their prayers, their cries for help, swallowed by bark and time. The silence above the roots. After the discovery of Hiroshi and Yuki Tanaka's remains, the story captivated 2 countries. But while the press focused on the tragic romance, the haunting final photographs, the messages scrawled on a tourist flyer, few noticed what quietly emerged from the official investigation. Someone might have heard them, someone might have been close, and someone might have walked away. The overlooked report. In the basement of a government archive in Rio de Janeiro, a low-level analyst for the federal police named Mariana Lopez stumbled on something while preparing documents for digitization. It was a misfiled incident report dated March 20th, 1990, 3 days after the Tanakas were reported missing. The report was handwritten, barely legible, and filed under wildlife irregularities. It read, "Unusual vocal echo, possibly human. Source unclear. Duration 4 to 6 minutes. Location Southern Ridge. No visual contact. Will recheck area tomorrow. M. Ramos." That name, M. Ramos, matched Miguel Ramos, a park ranger who had served for 21 years in Urca Hill before retiring in 1995. The report had been logged and stamped, but it was never followed up. A man with regret investigators tracked down Ramos, now 62, living in a fishing village near Paraty. He was quiet at first, guarded, but when they showed him the photos of the Jequitiba tree, the vertical split, the forensic lights, the embrace of the skeletons, he closed his eyes and whispered, "I thought it was a bird." He agreed to a recorded statement, and for the first time the real scope of the missed opportunity came into view. What he heard, Ramos told them that on the afternoon of March 20th, 1990, he was performing a solo trail sweep, part of a weekly patrol to check for erosion and fallen branches after storms. He'd stopped to rest near the South Ridge, an area about 400 meters downhill from the tree in question, when he heard it. "At first I thought it was birds, but then it changed. It sounded like crying. Human, soft but broken up, almost echoing." He stayed still, listened, called out. No response. "I walked about 50 meters into the woods, but the sound faded. I thought it was nothing, or maybe kids playing deeper in the forest." He made a note in his field log, submitted the report, and never heard about it again. No one asked him. No one cross-referenced his location with the missing person search area. "I didn't connect it," he said, "but I should have." The zone they never searched. At the time, the main search for Hiroshi and Yuki had been concentrated around high-risk terrain, the cliff edges of Pedra da Oca, the lake basin. The 3 marked trails towards Sugarloaf Mountain, but the southern ridge, where Ramos had heard the sound, was considered low priority. It was quiet, stable, safe, nothing dangerous about it. And so it had only been passed through once, briefly, by a team on day 2 of the search. They didn't go near the tree. And worse, the search maps didn't include Ramos's observation because his report never made it into the case file. The oversight wouldn't be discovered until 1997, 7 years too late. Patterns in the paperwork. After Ramos's statement, internal investigators launched a review of the entire case archive. They found 3 other logs from 1990 with small but significant notes. A volunteer claimed to smell rotting fruit near the southern trail loop, but it was dismissed. A rescue dog had briefly alerted at the foot of the ridge, but was redirected due to terrain mapping errors. A tourist, hiking without permission, reported hearing a woman singing in a language I didn't know in the trees. None of these were followed up. All of them were within 300 meters of the Jequitiba tree. One investigator, speaking off record, admitted, "It wasn't just human error, it was systemic forgetting." The families respond. When this new information was shared with the Tanaka families, they reacted with a painful mix of relief and devastation. Yuki's brother flew back to Brazil and visited the ridge himself. He stood near the tree in silence for an hour. When he returned, he said, "I don't blame anyone, but I do wish someone had listened." Hiroshi's mother gave one final interview to NHK, Japan's national broadcaster. She said, "I dreamed of my son calling for help once. In 1991, I woke up crying. Now I wonder, maybe that wasn't a dream." A a tree that held its secrets. The Jequitiba remained standing. A marker was placed nearby, carved with the words, "In silence, they waited. In silence, we remember." Local tour guides were instructed not to bring tourists near it, not out of shame, but respect. But some guides still speak of the tree at night. They say it has its own gravity, that the birds avoid it, that if you stand too close sometimes, you can hear breathing. No one has ever entered it again. The roots remember. By the spring of 1998, the world had moved on. The remains of Hiroshi and Yuki Tanaka were returned to Japan with full honors. A joint memorial was held in Kyoto, attended by hundreds, including members of the Japanese consulate in Brazil. Their story had already been told in documentaries, newspaper features, and a best-selling book titled Whispers in the Wood. But there was still one place that had not spoken. The tree, the Jequitiba, the ancient, towering guardian that had witnessed the couple's final days, held their bones for 7 silent years and then, inexplicably, cracked open, as if it had decided the world had waited long enough. While authorities closed the case, one man believed the story wasn't finished. Dr. Elias Moreira, a dendrochronologist, an expert in the study of tree rings, had a theory. If trauma leaves its mark in human tissue, he said, why wouldn't it leave a mark in wood? The case for memory trees are living history books. Each ring, each cell, each pulse of growth captures the story of its time. Sunlight, water, air, disease, fire. In Europe, researchers have studied trees that remembered war. In Japan, some trees near Hiroshima bore scars from the atomic blast, not on their bark, but in the very DNA of their cells. So why not this tree? Why not the Jequitiba? Why not the tree that held 2 humans as they died? Dr. Moreira filed for special access through the Brazilian Institute of the Environment, IBAMA. His request? To take 3 microcore samples from the inner and outer structure of the Jequitiba using a non-invasive sterile needle drill. It took 4 months. But on May 14, 1998, permission was granted. Into the hollow, once more. At dawn, Dr. Moreira and 2 graduate students made the hike to the Jequitiba. The trail was mist-covered, the forest unusually quiet. According to one assistant, it felt like something was watching. They carried minimal equipment, the core extraction drill, sterile gloves, vials, and a portable microscope. When they reached the tree, Dr. Moreira paused. "I could feel it," he later wrote. "The weight, the stillness. It wasn't a place, it was a presence." He drilled 3 samples, 1 from the outer bark for control, 1 from the east wall of the hollow, 1 directly behind where Hiroshi's remains had been found. He sealed each into an airtight case, and then they left. The results. Back at the lab, the team placed the samples under high-powered microscopes and prepared slides to analyze the rings from the year 1990. What they found was immediate and haunting. In the tree's 1990 growth ring, all 3 samples exhibited severe compression of xylem cells, high concentrations of resin cellular deformation in patterns identical to those caused by extreme heat, trauma, or rot. Yet the tree had experienced none of those conditions. There had been no lightning strike, no fire, no disease outbreak, and no external wound. The injury came from the inside, the trauma within. In dendrology, there is a phenomenon called internal scar memory, when a tree sustains damage in a hollow or core, but survives and heals around it. It's extremely rare. Dr. Moreira had only read about it once, in a case study from Austria, where a 400-year-old oak tree recorded the collapse of a fox den inside its trunk. But the Jequitiba's reaction was different. It had sealed itself slowly, reinforced its structure, shifted its sap flow, as if responding to a living presence inside. The samples showed heightened biological activity in the months following March 1990, and then in 1991, a layer of what researchers called growth hesitation, a thin, pale band across all 3 samples. It was the botanical equivalent of mourning. A tree that mourns. In his published report, Dr. Moreira wrote, "The Jequitiba does not simply grow, it remembers." This tree responded to something. Not fire, not drought, not infestation. It responded to grief. The paper was dismissed by many in the scientific community as romantic speculation. But some botanists were intrigued. Others were quietly moved. One wrote anonymously, "If a tree has stood for 3 centuries, and it held 2 hearts for 7 years, maybe it deserves the last word. What the roots gave back. In early 1999, a decision was made. The Jequitiba would not be cut down, but a portion of its lower trunk, already damaged from storm rot, would be cleared to allow natural regeneration. During the clearing, workers found something buried at the base of the root flare, wrapped in a water-resistant cloth bag. Inside were a charm bracelet belonging to Yuki, a photo of Hiroshi and Yuki at the airport smiling, and a note written in Japanese. It read, "If someone finds this, we were here, we were afraid, but we stayed together. This tree gave us a place to hold on. Please don't forget us." Yuki, March 21. The cloth bag had somehow shifted downward into the soil as the tree expanded. It had taken nearly a decade to surface, but the tree gave it back when it was ready. A final legacy. In 2002, the trail near the Jequitiba was officially renamed Trilha da Memoria das Raízes, Trail of the Memory of Roots. A bronze plaque was installed beside the tree. This forest holds the memory of two lives. It listened when no one else did. To this day, hikers still leave offerings, cranes folded from paper, small stones painted red and white, the colors of Japan, handwritten notes that say things like, "You are remembered. We heard you. Rest together. The tree still stands, and the roots still remember."